Hello and welcome to another IELTS live session. And this is where you can receive tips and advice and everything you need to know about preparing for the IELTS exam. So if you're watching on YouTube or watching on Facebook, I just want to welcome you and encourage you to include any comments or questions you may have as you're watching. And I'll be sure to respond and answer those as best as I can. And today I want to share with you about the listening section. I want to just really today simply give you some advice for your approach to the listening section, how you can be successful, and just really simplify the way that you look at the listening section. So let's get started. Today I'm going to share with you my 5 tips and best advice for the listening section. And I want to start off by talking about practice. And I'm sure you've all heard the saying, practice makes perfect. And I want to just tell you that maybe this isn't as true as you think it is. Practice is certainly beneficial. Practice will help you make progress, but it has to be a certain type of practice. It has to be practice that actually works in helping you achieve your goals and having your success. So let's just change this statement a little bit and say perfect practice makes perfect. In other words, you want to practice in the right way for the right reason and have the right goals in mind. And one of the ways to start thinking about perfection is to realize, first of all, that none of us is perfect, but we don't have to be. And even when it comes to the IELTS exam, you may think that getting a band 9 in the listening section would be a perfect score. But you know what? Even a band 9 is not perfect because you don't have to be perfect to get a band 9. You can get one incorrect answer out of 40 and you'll still get a band 9. So even band 9 is not a measurement of perfection. And I want you to think about the word perfect in a different way, because we always say we want to be perfect. And so we use a descriptive word, perfect, as an adjective. Something is perfect. It describes a state of being. It's an adjective. But why don't we think about perfect as a word in a different way? And that's to think of it this way. Perfect is a verb. And what this does is that when we start thinking of perfect as a verb, it'll help us to have the right mindset. And this is the first step to practicing perfectly. So we want to have the right mindset. We want to have the right attitude. We want to have the right approach to the listening section. And what I'm going to share with you now is really true about the whole IELTS exam and your preparation for everything to do with IELTS. But when we use the word perfect, let's change the pronunciation and the use of it a little and say perfect. Perfect is a verb. So what we want to do when it comes to our practice is we want to gradually perfect our practice. We want to make it better. We want to make progress. And so perfection is not a state, it's a process. We're continually perfecting our ability to do the questions in the listening section or on the IELTS exam as a whole. So the right mindset is to realize that you're not perfect, I'm not perfect, and we don't even have to have a perfect score to be successful on the IELTS exam. You know that to get a band 7, you need to get 30 out of 40 correct in the listening section. So it's not that we're looking for a perfect score or to be perfect. We want to perfect our practice ability. We want to begin to perfect and increase our ability when it comes to the listening section. It's a constant state of improvement, improving one day at a time, 1 week at a time. Perfection is a process. We want to perfect our ability to do the listening section. And in order to do this, along with the right mindset, we want to have the right focus. And having the right focus requires discipline. We want to be able to develop the ability to stay focused through the 30 minutes of the listening exam. And this requires stamina. It does require practice. Sometimes it's easy to drift off or to daydream or to lose focus, but this is something that has to be a part of your daily practice. Develop the discipline of staying focused while you're practicing, because what you do in practice will be what you do on test day. And maybe initially, when it comes to focus and staying focused on the task that's in front of you, this will help you stay focused on the questions. But what you have to do is realize that preparing for the IELTS exam and preparing for the listening section is like running a marathon or training for a marathon. And maybe the first time you go out for a run, when you train for the marathon, you'll run for 10 minutes. And then the next day you'll run for 15 minutes. You don't go out, or you'll run for 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers. You don't go out and try to run a full marathon every day. You want to gradually build. And this requires discipline. And discipline means just taking the steps on a consistent daily basis to work towards your goal. And discipline also means putting aside the things that will stop you from doing what you need to do. And so this means that you'll have to deal with distractions, because the distractions are what take you away from what you need to accomplish. And there are lots of different things that could distract us from our daily routine, our daily practice, and our daily focus on IELTS. For example, one of the worst distractors when it comes to preparation for the IELTS exam, and maybe anything else in life, is social media. Because one of the things that when you're practicing and working on IELTS, you're probably using your laptop or maybe your phone. And it's so easy to get a notification from a social media and you automatically have to look at it. Or you're working on your laptop and something else pops up, and suddenly that's more important than your focus on the IELTS exam. So I really recommend that one of the things that you do when you are preparing for IELTS, when you're practicing for IELTS, put everything else that can distract you aside. If you need to turn off the TV, if you need to turn down the music, shut the door to your office or your bedroom or wherever you're practicing. Get rid of the distractions. And I'm going to mention another distraction, but and if you deal with this distraction in the right way, it can also be one of your greatest benefits. Unfortunately, one of the biggest distractions can be the people who are close to you, people who expect things from you, even your friends who expect to hang out and chill with you every day. Maybe you're going to have a talk with your friends and say, hey, look, right now I need to focus on preparing for this IELTS exam, because this is what's going to get me into university and move to the country and go to the university that I'm really hoping to go to. So you're going to have to explain this to your friends. And if they're your good friends, they'll support you. And they may even hold you accountable. Did you practice for IELTS today? And then there's your family. And your family is probably the most important support you can have when it comes to preparing for the IELTS exam. Your parents, your spouse, your partner, uh, or even your children. And right from the outset of your preparation, if you want the support of your family and your friends, let them know what you're doing. Let them know that for a certain time each day, you're going to be totally focused on preparing for IELTS. And they'll support you in this. And then when you're not focused on the IELTS exam, you can give your family and your friends the focus and the time and that they need. And this is how you can turn these distractions into benefits by discipline and dealing with the distractions in the right way. And my third thing for how to practice perfectly, and this goes along with what I just said, you need to have the right approach. You need to be serious. You need to be serious about having success on the IELTS exam. You need to take it seriously. You need to keep it in perspective. As I just mentioned, the IELTS exam is very, very important to you, but no more important than your family and your friends and the other things. Maybe you're working full time or still going to school full time. But when it comes to the IELTS exam, you need to take it seriously. You need to know that this is something that you need to be fully prepared for. You know, and the reason I'm mentioning is when it comes to the IELTS exam and the listening section, whatever section of the IELTS exam you're talking about, when it comes to your preparation, the biggest mistake and the thing that leads to not having success and not getting the score you need on the IELTS exam is not being fully prepared because you underestimate the challenge that's ahead of you. And the IELTS exam is not easy. It requires serious approach and uh, uh, a serious amount of preparation. You can't just take it lightly. And this is the biggest mistake. And what ends up happening is that you end up wasting time that could be used better for your preparation. You waste energy by not doing the right things. And you end up wasting money when you end up with an unsuccessful test and not getting the score you need. So be serious and make sure that even before you book your test, you know that you're completely prepared. And on the other hand, when you take it this seriously, you make sure that you also make it stress free. And by stress free, I mean you keep it in balance. You keep it in balance with the other things in your life. If you can afford to practice 3 hours a week, take that 3 hours seriously, but use the rest of the time for the things that are going to keep your physical and mental health in check, the things that are going to keep your relationships with your family and friends healthy, and have time to do things that will also uh, give you time to relax and to do the things that you enjoy doing. So this period of time where you are preparing for the IELTS exam, while it has to be serious, you also want to make sure you keep it stress free. And this is by keeping it in perspective and keeping it in balance. So if you can afford 3 hours a week, then you know that it might take you 3 months to prepare for the IELTS exam. If you know you can spend 6 hours a week, then you know it might only take you 2 months. But be realistic. If you can only spend 3 hours a week, this can be very good and can be really serious approach to the IELTS exam because you're keeping it in balance, but don't expect to be fully prepared in 2 months. Balance, also make sure you balance your expectations so that you don't put too much pressure to accomplish too much in too short a time. And that's another good tip for keeping your practice stress-free. Just remember that practice, you want to perfect things as you go. This is a process, and if you do, if you have the right focus and the right approach, uh, this will help you to be very serious about your preparation, but at the same time, keep it stress-free and maybe even enjoyable. So that's my first tip overall. Just make sure you have the right attitude and mindset, and you keep those things in mind as you're preparing. Number two, avoid confusing tips and tricks. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just to say, just because an IELTS teacher has 1 million views on YouTube doesn't mean that they're offering good advice. Just because they have thousands of subscribers doesn't mean that their advice is good. Unfortunately, 95% of the IELTS instructions that you see on YouTube and other sources are false, fake, phony, garbage, whatever you want to call them. They're not going to help you stay focused and disciplined because they're trying to offer you tips and tricks and things that will make the exam easier. And this is not what you want. You don't want to make the exam easier with all these confusing tips and tricks and different things that work for the people. Maybe they work for the person who's making the video, but are they going to work for you? So you don't want to take all these tips and tricks and special techniques and and quick strategies. You want to make sure, rather than make it easy, that you focus on keeping it simple. And by keeping it simple, it means you focus on the right resources for your practice. And I want to tell you, when I prepare lessons and videos I would encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. There is something for every part of the IELTS exam, and there are lots more tips for even practice. The webinar, last week's webinar, is still available to view, and it's a great video to add to this one because it talks about really improving your practice and making the most of your practice time for the entire IELTS exam. But when I make a lesson or a video, and the best teachers and tutors on YouTube do this as well, we stick to the official websites. The official websites make it very clear what's expected to get the score you need in every section in listening, and they provide official practice materials. So as you're preparing for the listening test, just go to these official sites and go to the section about listening, and you will have not only tips and strategies that come from the actual people who have designed and developed the IELTS exam. You'll be able to practice them, and you will know that you have reliable resources. And there's 4 that I want to mention to you, and I'll also put these links in the comments. The first one is British Council, and the second is IDP. British Council and IDP are the ones that organize and administer the tests worldwide. They provide practice tests and official material. And just a note, when you're booking your test, make sure you book your test at an official British Council or IDP test center. If it's not British Council or IDP, it's not an official test center. And the exam at each, whether it's British Council or IDP, the exam is going to be exactly the same. But if you use IDP or British Council, you'll know for sure that you have booked your test with an official test center. So I would encourage you to stick with these two websites as well as IELTS.org. IELTS.org is another official website put together by the people who have created and administer the IELTS exam. So these are your three official websites that can be most helpful. And the fourth one is Cambridge. Cambridge are the ones who created the test and designed the questions for the test. There's a very popular series of books by Cambridge. I think they go from 1 to 17. 18 will be coming out soon. I would suggest that any of the books from book 5 and onwards would be the most helpful material that you could use for preparing for the IELTS exam. And the good thing about each of these is their goal is to simplify the strategy for the listening section, giving you clear tips, simple instructions that will help you. And if you want another good resource, again, subscribe to my YouTube channel, because all my videos are only created with material from these 4 sources. Number 3, and this is so important, is know your goal. So this is true for the whole IELTS exam. It's true for anything in life. But when it comes to the listening section, your goal is just to get as many correct answers as possible. And I mentioned earlier that for a band 7, you need to get 30 out of 40. And band 7 is about the average that you should work for if you're planning to go to university in an English-speaking country. Usually the minimum requirement overall is 6.5, but you'll have to have at least a 6 in each section, which means having at least a 6 in the listening section. So make sure that you know your goal, and whatever your goal is, if you need a 6.5, I recommend when it comes to your practice to perfect your practice until you can get a band score higher than you need on test day. If you can get a band score higher than what you need on test day, you're ready for the exam and you're ready to book your test. Because on exam day, while there won't be any surprises in terms of the types of questions, there will be a little extra nervousness and stress. There may be some other things, other distractions that you're not used to, but make sure that you can get a band score higher in your practice than what you need on the exam. And the other biggest benefit is that this goes back to your mindset. So often we say, you know what, I can never get the score I need. I'm going to fail again. I just can't do it. But if you can get in your practice a little higher than what you need on test day you're going to feel totally confident and you're going to feel totally comfortable. You're going to be fully prepared and you're going to be successful. So know your goal and get as many correct answers. Now, in today's session, I'm not going to give you, I can't give you a real strategy because each of the questions has a slightly different strategy. I will, in a moment, give you kind of an overall strategy that applies to all the questions. But first of all, make sure you know to know your goal, know your enemy. These are the things that you don't need to worry about that will stop you from achieving your goal in listening. When it comes to the listening section, you don't have to understand everything. You don't have to understand every word that you hear on the recording. What you need to understand is the context and the overall setting that the recording's taking place in. You need to understand the topic, but understand that it's not going to be an academic topic. It's going to be an everyday situation. All the sections in the listening test are everyday situations in a social context. You don't have to have any kind of special academic understanding or even special vocabulary, because the listening test is the same for both the academic exam and the general exam. So it's not the listening test is not an academic test. So you don't need to have any prior knowledge of topics, any special understanding, any special vocabulary. You just have to be aware of what takes place in everyday situations, because this is what the listening test. Can you make arrangements to buy a plane ticket? Can you follow the directions to walk through a museum? Can you understand the main points of a brief lecture that you might hear on a specific topic? You don't have to have prior knowledge and understanding. And the other thing is, the biggest enemy is panicking. As soon as you start listening and you say, oh my God, I don't understand this, and you panic, you miss a question, and then you miss the next question. What you need to do is just settle in, feel relaxed, take the steps that are going to help you to understand the recording you're about to hear, and just do the best you can. If you miss an answer, it's not the end of the world, because again, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to gradually become better and better as you go. But let me just give you a quick strategy. If you want a strategy for each question type, again, subscribe to my YouTube channel. And on my YouTube channel, there's a playlist for the listening section that includes a video for every specific type of question. And that's the first strategy when it comes to the listening section. Make sure you understand the question type and what you need to do to be successful on that question, whether it's multiple choice, matching questions, being able to label a map or a diagram, or fill in the gaps in a sentence or a paragraph, a table, or a chart. You need to know, as soon as you look at the question, what you need to do to be successful on that type of question. And then in the listening section, this is very unique to the listening section and very important. Pay careful attention to the instructions. There's two types of questions, of instructions that you'll have in the listening section. The first is the ones that you read at the beginning of each question. And when you come to reading these instructions, you're just looking for a specific detail, like 2 or 3 words, or write in a letter to fill in an answer, because you will, from your practice, know as soon as you see the question what type it is and what it takes. But one of the most helpful things about the listening section is not just the instructions that you read, but the instructions that you listen to. Because when you listen to the instructions, you're given the context, you're given the setting for the recording you're going to hear. And what I just mentioned about understanding, you don't have to understand everything. You don't have to understand every word that you hear in a recording. But what you do need to understand, as well as the type of question, is the context of the recording. And if you understand the setting, is this taking place in an office? Is it taking place in a university classroom? Is it taking place on a radio show? Understanding the context is one of the best steps for success in the listening section. Understand. And as you listen to the instructions, you also can become accustomed to the accent that you're going to hear during that recording. So pay careful attention, especially to the instructions that you're listening to. And then you want to just read each question and highlight the key words and details. And the key words and details are the words and details that are going to help you narrow down your options and choose the correct answer and know the correct answer when you hear it. In some questions on in the listening section, you can almost predict what you're going to hear and what the answer to the question is going to be. You can predict whether you're listening for a time of year, a month. You can predict whether the type of word you're listening to. Are you listening for a noun, a verb, or an adjective? So that's going to be a part of every type of question. You want to be aware of paraphrases and synonyms. The words that you see in the questions may be synonyms or paraphrases of what you'll actually hear in the recording. You just want to be aware of all these things, and you just want to keep moving forward. If you miss a question, don't panic. Just make sure you're ready for the next one. Maybe always be looking at the question that's coming, not the question or second guessing the one that you just answered. And if you do miss a question, keep moving forward and maybe make an educated guess. Remember, you want to get as many correct as possible, and you don't lose any marks for wrong questions. This is just a very brief overview of the kind of strategy and the things to be aware of in your strategy. But if you want a specific, you need to make sure that you know the specific strategy for each question type. And again, you can find help with that in the playlist. The link is in the comments. Number 4, I'm just going to go over this very quickly. Get used to multitasking. There are 2 types of tests when it comes to the IELTS exam, paper-based and computer-based. And in the listening section, on the computer-based, there's not much to do because everything is right in front of you on the screen, and you just simply choose your correct answer, and the next one comes up on the screen. There's not a lot that you have to do. The computer-based and paper-based are exactly the same tests, the same content, the same questions, but the computer-based test just simply takes away a lot of this multitasking, and that could be an advantage, but it could also be a disadvantage because the paper-based test does require more multitasking. You're reading the words, the questions on the page, you're predicting, and you're marking the words, you're marking keywords, you're circling titles and labels on diagrams and charts, and you're controlling the pace by flipping the pages and moving from one set of questions to the next set of questions. So when it comes to the paper-based test, you are doing a lot more, but these are the things that can really be very helpful to help you get a better score, because you are marking words, you are doing more predicting, you are a little more in control of moving forward to the next section. In the computer-based, once you finish the section, you have to wait for the next one to begin. But on the paper-based, once you're finished a section, you can automatically go and start marking and reading and predicting and preparing even before that section starts. So multitasking, it does require more practice. It does require a little more work, but it can go a long way to helping you get a better score. But again, when it comes to paper-based or computer-based, choose the test that you think will work best for you. When you go to the official test center, make sure that they offer the test of your choice. And the last thing I just want to finish up with, these are just some kind of extra little things. But when it comes to test day, you want to be fully prepared. And there are just some things that you don't want to have to think about on test day, because these things, they may seem like very little things. You just want to make sure that you don't allow them to sap any energy or take any of your focus off what's really important. So you don't want to waste energy. One of the biggest things is if you miss a question, keep moving forward. This is probably one of the most important things when it comes to the listening section. Just keep moving forward. If you miss a question, don't panic. Just make sure that you don't allow it to take your focus off the next question and end up missing 2 or even 3 in a row. And the last 2 are just two questions that I get asked so often when it comes to the listening section. And the first is about capital letters. Can you use capital letters, all capital letters, to answer? Or sometimes I get asked, are capital letters important? If you're not going to, first of all, you can use all capital letters. And maybe that's just the best solution so that you have nothing to think about on test day. Just decide that when it comes to the listening section, whenever you have to fill in a word, use all capital letters. You're allowed to do that. And if you decide to do that and just practice, whenever you practice, just always use capital letters. That's just one less thing to think about and waste energy on test day. You can use all capital letters. If you decide not to use all capital letters, then capitals matter. If you're using a proper name of a city or a place or a name, you have to make sure you use capital letters correctly. If you don't want to have to worry about that, then just use all capital letters. And that leads to spelling. Spelling counts. So each word, when you fill in a gap, has to be spelled correctly. So one of the tips that I just want to finish off this lesson today with is when it comes to spelling. At the end of each section, it says, oh, you have time to check your answers. You're not going to check your answers there. It wastes time. Where you're going to be doing any kind of checking on the IELTS exam is when you have that time to transfer your answers. After the 30 minutes of the test, you're given 10 minutes to transfer to an answer sheet. This is when you can check your spelling, because that's basically the only thing you can really check. You could go back if you have time to check and make those educated guesses on the questions you missed. But spelling is really the only thing that you can check during that 10 minutes. So what do you do during the test? During the test, don't overthink your spelling. If you have to write in a word and you're not sure how to spell it, just write it in. Write it in, even if you know you're spelling it incorrectly, write it in any way you can, just to make sure the first step, you have the right word. Because if you have the right word, you'll have the correct answer if you can end up spelling it correctly. So don't be distracted or overthink spelling while you're doing the actual test. If you're not sure of spelling, write it in anyways. And then during that 10 minutes, when you're transferring your answers, that's the time to check your spelling. Even as a native speaker and a well-educated person with a good vocabulary, sometimes even I'll go to write a word, I'll say, how do I spell that? Because I'm just maybe having a little brain fog in that moment, and so it may not look right. So that happens to everybody, especially if you're under a little pressure and stress. But so just write it in and leave it. Sometimes when you come back to it after a few minutes and look at it again, you automatically think of the right way to spell it. Or you look at it and you say, that's not the correct way to spell it. I need to change this. And you just automatically change it. So don't overthink spelling during the test. Well, I want to encourage you to check out the links in the comments. I've included a link to another video that I did on how to really maximize your practice that I think will be helpful to you. I've included links to those official websites that I've mentioned. And don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel for lots more information and help. And if you need to reach out, my email address is included there as well. And I want to wish you all the best in your preparation and wish you success on the IELTS exam.